Hey everyone. Okay, we're on to summary lecture two already. And as the title will imply, we are doing a situation analysis, which is analysis of the situation. What situation is that? Well, just to remind you, so last time we just talked about like, okay, what is social marketing? And I gave you some examples of different types of social issues that social marketing can tackle. So even though these are two different steps, for your assignment, you're going to kind of like need to do both together. So, the for the before you do the situation analysis, which we'll talk about in a second, hopefully you have in mind some sort of social issue that you want to tackle, and you're going to try to think about what you want to do with that social issue. And then once you have that established, we're going to talk about like, okay, before you start getting into the nitty-gritty about what this campaign is going to be about, let's just like take an overview of what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses as an organization, which you can kind of make that up. And also, what's kind of going on in the current climate that could either help the campaign or hurt the campaign, just so you kind of, again, have a idea about the situation. Um, so part of this is going to be you just doing a little bit of research. I don't require a ton of research for this class. You don't need to go through, 20 academic journals or anything like that. I just want you to find some credible sources, and you're in a master's program, so I have an idea you have a good idea about what a credible source is, right? But just something where some real research has been done, that maybe gives you some statistics about the problem that you're interested in or who's affected by the problem. The whole idea is to really make a case for why there even needs to be any sort of campaign to address whatever issue you're interested in. If you want to reduce opioid addiction, or if you want to maybe work on reduction of, oh, actually, I've had a lot of students do this, reduce concussions among football players, or whatever the issue is, you need to be able to convince a reader, maybe somebody who would want to fund the campaign, that like this is an issue that is worth addressing, and that there are like maybe nobody else is doing it, like it that there's a need to actually have a formal communication campaign to come and do it. So you can answer all different types of questions. I have like, what does a problem look like? You want to describe it. It's like, oh, maybe it's about screen time, and you're like, kids spend X amount of hours per day on their devices, and then how bad is it? It's like, oh, well, it affects their sleep. And, 9 out of 10 doctors say that, kids' brains are mush or whatever. Again, this is not, I'm being silly, but you don't have to say much, I think, to be able to find a few nuggets of information that will be convincing to an audience of perhaps potential funders that this is something we need to focus on. Okay. Um, the background example that your textbook gives, or one of them, you can read here, but you can see it's pretty simple, but they cover a lot of ground here. At the very beginning, they're just like, here's the nature and the scope of the problem. There is this obesity epidemic, and guess who's affected? Well, 35% of Black Americans and 27.9% of Hispanic Americans were obese. Okay, whatever. And then if you want to get into the reasons for the problem, the reason that could be relevant is because maybe that's how you want to end up structuring your campaign. Like, okay, this is the problem, the reasons are this, so we want to tackle these reasons, right? Again, there's lots of ways to go about it. There's no one way to construct it. The only thing I really want to point out right now is what I'm looking for in your assignment is just some convincing arguments that your issue that you've decided even matters. And one other thing I do want to point out is I would like to see your sources. Not because I'm going to be like so judgy about it, but sometimes I can look at them and try to parcel out little details myself if needed and stuff like that. So you don't see a reference page or anything like that here, but if you could just, it doesn't have to be like super formal, but if you could just like make sure that I have access to whatever sources you use, that would be great. Um, so once you've like established some background, then you're ready to formulate like your overall purpose. And this is the type of thing we're going to be coming back to all semester. It's going to be an anchor. Oops, sorry, there goes my cuckoo clock. Um, it's going to be an anchor for just kind of keeping you on like, okay, what's the main goal here? Um, Keep it really broad and short. Sometimes I say that and people are like, oh, by short, you mean two paragraphs. No, I don't. I don't even mean a full sentence. Okay. And the only thing that is really required, and I want to make sure you have, is it should have language about increasing or decreasing something. Your purpose ultimately is to change some facet of some sort of social phenomenon. And we either want to make something happen more or we want to make something happen less. So your purpose, again, doesn't even have to be a full sentence, could just be this fragment to decrease teen pregnancy. Oops. To increase or decrease the rate of hepatitis in people with opioid use disorder to and you can get into that if you want, but if you just want to like leave it really simple and not even like talk about the audience, that's fine. So there should be some sort of increase or decrease, okay? Um, and then your focus is going to get a little bit more specific in terms of like, okay, and how do you think you want to do this? And by the way, this is the type of thing that might change like as we keep moving forward, and that's fine. But hopefully the purpose will be anchored, and then this focus is going to just sort of like help you lay out your options here. So obviously there's a lot of things that could like, factor into the level of teen pregnancy. It could be like not using different types of contraception. It could be about maybe like not communicating to young people about sex or whatever. So, like, the point is, there's always sort of like different angles that you can take to approach a particular problem, and the focus is going to like try to get you there. So, okay, so that's it. So, that'll just sort of set up. And then, like I said, a lot of times I'm going to ask you for that in other assignments just so that we can always just look back and we can compare all the little steps that you're doing and see how they align with that purpose. Here's just another example. This is what I want it to look like in your assignment. Again, took this straight out of the textbook, so you can go and look at it for more examples if you want. But you can see the campaign's purpose, and they did a nice job italicizing it, was to decrease diabetes. Okay, so yeah, not increasing, decreasing, but choose one or the. I mean, not that I'm saying you want to increase diabetes. I usually don't push back on people's purpose unless it's like clearly not a social marketing thing or whatever. But I'm like, I'm not going to judge you, but hopefully it's not to increase diabetes because yeah. Um, and then the focus just gets a little bit more into like, and how would we do that? Like, what kind of aspect would we want to focus on? Well, we're going to focus on healthy eating and physical activity. That's a lot. I actually think that it would be safer for you, and you'll thank me later if you just kind of pick like one focus. But with a focus on healthy eating and physical activity among Black and Hispanic residents in Central Brooklyn and East New York. Now, if you remember back here, that really aligns with their background example here. If you read that, because they're saying like a big contributor to the problem is that these particular demographic groups happen to have high rate of obesity in there. So that it should all kind of align like that. So that's what I'm saying. Do your background research first, and it hopefully will just give you a better idea of how you want to purpose yourself and focus. Okay, and then you're going to do the SWOT analysis. I found this lovely little infographic. I love infographics. It's something that I don't draw, but they always look so pretty on my PowerPoint slides. So, a SWOT. SWOT stands for, you might have even done this in other realms that aren't social marketing, right? Identifying strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So this is sort of like a pre-campaign assessment that you want to do to kind of like figure out like where you stand with regard to the issue. Okay. Strengths are like what kind of resources you have. What are the advantages that you're like, hey, now's a great time to do this. And we have all of these tools at our disposal that are going to help us like accomplish this objective. Weaknesses are like, oh, but we don't have a lot of experience doing this type of thing. So, or, that kind of thing. Opportunities are just kind of things out there that like, hey, isn't it great that we're working on obesity right now and we have all of these amazing weight loss drugs that are out there, right? That would be sort of something, it's like, it's not something you did. It's not a strength of you or your organization. It's more like, hey, out there in the world, these things are happening. But likewise, there are also threats, right? So maybe you could say, but a threat is that insurance doesn't want to cover these things or something like that, right? So here, I'll give you more specifics here. Um, you'll notice to those first two up here, the strengths and the weaknesses, I kept saying like we. So yeah, the strengths and weaknesses you're going to think about in terms of an organizational context. And here is where we start to imagine in this class. You're going to hear me talk about imagination a lot. Um, this is not a real campaign, obviously, and you don't have the resources of any specific organization. So I do want you to sort of imagine yourself as belonging to whatever type of organization you would like. Okay. It could be a big one that exists. It could be the CDC. It could be the NIH or I don't know, what's the heart disease one that they do the red campaign? I don't know. Like there could be an organization that it sort of has a history of dealing with the issue that you're interested in, and you want to say that's that's the organization that I'm going to pretend like I'm working, toward, right? And then you might want to do a little research on that organization. But if you just wanted to make up an organization that doesn't exist, I'm completely fine with that too. In fact, I might not even notice the difference, depending on what the issue is and how familiar I am with it. But I would like you to sort of establish it, and then because you're kind of imagining your organization, obviously some of these strengths and weaknesses can be imagined too. That said, whenever we're going to be imagining in this class, I do want it to be based in sort of logical consistency, right? I don't want you I want you to try to imagine what a realistic scenario would be for whatever sort of organization you choose. It's a hard thing for me to think of examples of, and actually, maybe that's for the best. I don't want to give you examples of what would be too far gone because hopefully it won't even happen. All I'm saying is like, yeah, you can't say that one of your resources is that we have all of these unicorns at our disposal to be spokespeople for our campaign. It has to be sort of like grounded in what would be realistic to expect an organization like the one you chose has in terms of different strengths that you want to maximize or internal weaknesses that you want to minimize. So back, yeah, an educated but imagined assessment is what we're going for. And then external things have nothing to, those are the things that have nothing to do with your organization. Those are things that involve things that are going on just like in the current political or financial or technological. Well, here, I'll go to the next slide, climate. Um, when we talk about opportunities and threats in the macro environment, it could be any of these types of things, right? Things that are really outside of your control, whether when I say you, it could be your organization, you as a person, whatever. It's just stuff that it's like, okay, we're going to launch this campaign right now, but eesh, we've got all this inflation going on, right? So it could be an economic force. It's like maybe that's going to like make it more difficult if we're trying to encourage people to eat more healthy, because they're not going to have as much money to spend on healthy foods or something like that. It could be political forces. It could be the fact that right now the CDC is changing their recommendations for what constitutes healthy eating, and some people may not think that's healthy or whatever, so it could just be things that you're just like, okay, I can't control this, but we need to acknowledge that it's going on in the political arena. Maybe the Supreme Court is making a decision. Maybe you're interested in improving women's access to healthcare or something, and there is legislation that's threatening Planned Parenthood or something like that, right? Natural forces, other things that are just like acts of God, right? Like those are like the biggest like macro environmental things you can think of, right? Maybe there was some sort of natural disaster around where you want to like sort of target a specific problem. Maybe that is, kind of one of the reasons that you even want to do this campaign, because like, an earthquake like caused some sort of like health crisis or safety crisis or something like that. Cultural forces, different things going on in fashion or health trends, right? That could affect either as an opportunity or a threat what you're trying to do. If vaping is really like in right now, then that's not going to help you if you're doing that's going to be a threat to an anti-vaping campaign. But at the same time, if there are health trends that are really positive, like people are wearing fitness trackers all the time, that could be something you want to take advantage of. That's an opportunity. Actually, maybe that one goes better into the technological forces one because, right, sometimes we get new technologies, screening methods. So now, it used to be that you'd have to get a colonoscopy when you turn to certain age, but now they have the poop in a box situation, where people can magically just, I mean, not everybody's into that, but you can just poop in your home and put it in the mail, and you don't have to go through all the trouble of getting a colonoscopy. So maybe if you're doing a, a a colon cancer screening campaign, that's going to be some sort of technological health related opportunity that you could leverage. And then other things like demographic forces. Maybe well, think about like the aging population. Maybe that's an opportunity in some ways. Maybe it's a threat to some of the things that you're trying to do. Changes in education level, the type of knowledge that people come into the issues with. Anyway, I digress. I just wanted to give you a lot of examples. You don't have to in your assignment have, all of these things as opportunities or threats, but I'm trying to show you that like there's a lot of ways to think about things in this macro environment that will probably be related to some whatever your purpose is. And that's it. That's how you do a SWOT, right? You're just going to be doing like a general sort of like overview about like what's going on both within your organization and outside of your organization that could affect your ability to communicate to a very large audience about this issue and have them take some of your recommendations. And next time we're going on to step 3, and we'll talk specifically about who those people are going to be. But in the meantime, you've got all the content you need to go ahead and get a solid grasp on what your campaign purpose is and, give a little background so you understand where you stand with it. And that's it. The end. Okay, bye.